Hey BookTube, welcome back. I'm Winx, and the ink I'm talking about today is a review of The Dragon's Blade by Michael R. Miller. I was sent a copy of this book in exchange for a fair and honest review. Also, I was sent a Kindle copy, but I just have to draw attention to the cover of the physical copy because it is gorgeous, so let's all just take this in right here. So if you can't tell by the name, this is a fantasy novel which is set in its own fantastical world. When the book begins, this world is in the midst of a huge war, and there are also a lot of races in the book. So on the sort of evil side, there is this guy named Rector who is raising up this army of demons and specters, which the specters are like ghosty shadow creatures that can control the demons. And it's not even totally clear what Rector's motives are, but you get the sense that it is this mystery that's sort of going to unravel as the books go along, and more so in further books. So that's happening. Then there are the allied races, which are humans, dragons, and fairies. And the dragons underwent this big transformation several thousand years ago. So they are no longer in the bestial dragon form, but they now are humanoid and just generally larger and stronger than humans. The fairies are likewise physically comparable to humans. They are just blue-skinned, and some of them have wings. Then there is also a group of wizards in this world, but at the point that we enter the story, there are only 2 left. And one of them fights for the allied races, which is Brackendon, and the other, which is Castellan, is serving Rector. Then through the book, we follow the story of Darnweir, who is the dragon prince. When we meet him, he is this very angry dragon dude. In the midst of a battle, he gets really badly injured and is luckily found by Brackendon, who realizes that Darnweir is about to die, and the only way that he can possibly save his life is by doing this risky spell that will literally turn Darnweir into a baby. He reverts time on him and turns him back into little baby dragon Darnweir and hides him away so he can grow back up to adult dragon age and retake his spot as the then Dragon King. So we follow Darnweir through sort of his second life and into adulthood, and as all of the story is unraveling. So right away, the story itself is really interesting. I thought that the plot was really well done, and there were some twists in there that I didn't expect, but I really enjoyed. Just worked out really well. I also liked how there were some new twists on some classic fantastical races and such. The fact that the dragons are humanoid was really interesting, and I'm really curious to hear more about the transformation and all of that. Also, the magic system really pulled me in. It's a really intense magic system, and the stakes are really high. I have not seen too many other magic systems that have such high cost magic as this, so that definitely added an interesting component to it. And it just so happens that Brackendon was my favorite character in the story, so he is the main person using this magic, so that definitely was a win for me. I really only ran into 2 main issues with this book. The first of which I think is an easy fix. I think it could just do with a little bit more editing. There were a few points where there were typos or the wrong word in a sentence, and it was enough that it kept kind of pulling me out of the story. Also, there was some inconsistent formatting, so like inner dialogue, sometimes that was italicized, sometimes it was in quotes, sometimes it was just plain text, and it kind of flipped around, so if that was more consistent, that would be nice. And then there were also a few times where there were statements that ended in question marks, and all of these little things just kept pulling me out of the story a bit. So I think maybe just another round of editing could get those out and make for a smoother read. Then the only other thing is I wish that there was a little bit more character development in the beginning of the book. I felt like I had a really hard time connecting to the characters for a while. Likewise, I think there were a few points where a bit more character backstory and a little bit, I don't know if it's necessarily like development of relationships or just the reactions that characters had. I wish it was fleshed out a bit more. One example for the character development side of things, there's one character that we meet named Cassandra, and she's been a prisoner her whole life, like since she was a baby, but she's sort of a well-treated prisoner. She's got her own room and access to books and wears really nice clothes and all these things. But we meet her and she is very determined to escape. She's very aware that she's a prisoner, and she talks like she has known this her whole life. I feel like if she was actually a prisoner from birth, she wouldn't know any other life, so she would probably have something comparable to Stockholm Syndrome. So I wish maybe we could have seen some memory or something of the moment when she realized that she was a prisoner and how that led to her needing to escape and her whole drive to be free. I think that that would have just made it click for me. Then for the relationship and reaction side of things, I noticed a few times, particularly early on in the books, I feel like this got very much less so as the book went on, but I felt like the reactions that people had weren't as intense as the situation warranted. There is a point where Brackenden goes to meet this guy named Cosmo, and years ago Brackenden did a huge favor by casting this spell, which, as I mentioned before, magic is very high cost, so that was like a considerable risk that he took to cast a spell for Cosmo. And so when he shows up out of the blue, I would have expected to have a warmer welcome, or more acknowledgement of what Brackenden did for him in the past, and that seemed to not really happen. There were also a few points where someone basically made a discovery about themselves, and I would have expected more shock, and there didn't seem to be as much. They kind of just took it in stride. So stuff like that, where I would have really liked to see more into that character's head in the moment and it had more of a reaction, I guess. So those are the only things that just didn't totally work for me, but besides those things, I did really enjoy this book. The story was really, really good, and it's unusual for me to be that driven by the story. Normally it's all about the characters, and as I said in the very beginning, I had a hard time connecting to the characters. It wasn't until about halfway through that I felt like I was getting a better sense of the characters and able to latch on to them more. So the fact that I was being really driven through the first half of the book based on my interest in the story and the world definitely speaks a lot for me personally, because I'm such a character-driven reader. So overall, I ended up giving this 4 stars on Goodreads. I think it would be technically a 3.5 for me, but I think a bit more editing would put it at a solid 4 for me. And I'm definitely really curious to see how the story continues. I do plan on checking out the next book. Alright, well, let me know in the comments if you guys have read this book and what you thought of it, or if you are considering checking it out. I do recommend it. Alright, thanks guys for watching. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you'd like to see more. I hope everybody's week is going well, and I will talk to you soon. Bye!